Welcome to the Compassionate Newsroom podcast. I'm Dr. Kortni Alston Lemon. I'm a former television reporter and news director turned happiness scholar. I train news leaders and journalists internationally to foster workplace well-being, resilience, and a positive culture in their newsrooms. Every week, I'll bring you evidence-based strategies and inspiring interviews from news leaders, journalists, and experts worldwide who prioritize the mental health of their teams and themselves. Let's redefine what it means to lead with compassion in journalism, one episode at a time. Hello, it's me, Dr. Kortni. I am so happy that you're here with me this week. So today's episode is one that I'm deeply excited to share because it touches the heart of what we do here at the Compassionate Newsroom, bringing science, empathy, and care into the center of journalism, especially when we're talking about journalism well-being in the workplace, in the newsroom. And that means talking about something that's often misunderstood, positivity. And let me say this right now. Positivity is not Pollyanna. It's not about fake smiles. It's not about ignoring what's hard. In fact, positive psychology is built for the tough stuff. It's the science of what makes life worth living, even when it's hard. And if you're in a newsroom covering stories, that weight is heavy, right? With violence, grief, injustice, you know how hard it can be to carry all of it and show up every day. So, how do we build real resilience, not just bouncing back, but growing stronger in the process? That's what we're going to dive into today. So let's talk about what positive psychology is and why it's not fluff, all right? Positive psychology was pioneered by Dr. Martin Seligman, and it's not about ignoring suffering. It's about understanding what allows people to flourish, even in the face of it. In fact, one of my favorite frameworks is PERMA. I often talk about it a lot when I'm training news organizations. And PERMA stands for the P, positive emotions, E is engagement, the R, relationships, the M, meaning, the A, achievement, and each of these elements contribute to psychological well-being. And when applied in a newsroom setting, it can help journalists that are not just under pressure, but under constant load. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking about creating a brief webinar as it relates to PERMA. If you like that idea, please let me know. On the Compassionate Newsroom, on our website, you will find voicemail. I love to get a voicemail from you. So please don't hesitate to go to thecompassionatenewsroom.com and check out the voicemail and leave a message and say, you know what, Dr. Kortni, I love to hear a webinar on what PERMA is and sharing some of the things that I share in training with you on a much more visual scale. So now let's go back to talk more about all things positive psychology. And although I'm not going to break down all of the different elements of PERMA, but let's talk about meaning for a moment. Journalists, we are meaning makers. I think that's one of the things that really drew me in to journalism. We interpret the world and help others make sense of it. And when you find meaning in your work, when you say, this story matters, this community matters, it becomes truly this incredible body of resilience. Here's a moment I'll never forget. Well, today, for those of you who may not know, I am proudly married to a wonderful man. I can't stop talking about him enough. He is an incredible human being, and he just happens to be an amazing journalist. His name is Ken Lemon, and my husband, Ken, has been working in the Charlotte market as a television reporter for over 25 years. But more than 25 years ago, before we ever met, I was living a very different chapter. First, I was a young widow, just 86 days into my first marriage. when my late husband Brian was shot and killed by his friend and business partner. When I returned to the newsroom, still processing the trauma and coming back from bereavement leave, the first story I was assigned to, believe it or not, was to cover a funeral. And I did it. I reported on the story. I mean, that part of the story I've shared before in previous episodes of this podcast. But what I think I really haven't talked about enough is the community that rallied around me. And that community were my colleagues in the newsroom. They knew the weight of what I was carrying. They went to the news director and said she shouldn't have to do this. She shouldn't be covering this story. They spoke up. Well, they spoke up for me when I couldn't. They held space for my grief. They offered protection when I didn't even know how to ask for it at the time. That kind of care that's real, is human, compassionate care made all the difference. I'm happy to say those coworkers are still my lifelong friends. I want to personally thank those friends, Dr. Karen Ladley and Monica McDonald, for being the champions for me in the newsroom to help me. But see, that's the thing, is it wasn't about like ignoring any level of my suffering. That's not, toxic positivity. It was facing it. It was the truth, and it was faced with love. And that really kept me going. So research shows that positive emotions don't make us naive. They make us resilient. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory tells us that even small doses of positivity, like a shared laugh, a sincere thank you from a supervisor, or even a moment of appreciation, can literally build our capacity to help with stress, to help us build our resilience. And that's not about ignoring trauma. It means giving ourselves the psychological tools to move through with care, community, and clarity. So here's what I know. Too many journalists are hurting in silence. They're absorbing trauma, they're exhausted, and many are leaving the industry, a field that they love. And one of the things I am very happy to see is that we are talking much more about well-being than we ever did when I started out in the industry 25 years ago. But what if your newsroom gave space for hope? What if leaders understood that compassion and courage are not opposites, but they're teammates? They go together. That's the newsroom I want to help build with you, a compassionate one. So here's your takeaway this week. I want you to write down one thing, just one thing that brought you hope, joy, or gratitude today, no matter how small it is. And tell someone on your team something you appreciate about them. Let's start normalizing kindness as leadership. As a former chair of a university, I had the privilege of leading faculty, staff, and students. And one of the most impactful things I introduced was this. I began our meetings with a simple question. What are you grateful for? Now, it was a strength-based approach rooted in positive psychology, and over time, it changed the tone of our team. It reminded us, even in seasons of stress, there is always something to hold on to, something that grounds us in meaning and hope. And it also allowed the team to see how grateful they were for each other. So here's one more practice you can try tonight. It's called 3 Good Things exercise. So before bed, write down 3 things that went well today and why. It could be something as simple as, I laughed with a colleague because I paused to check in. Or I met a tough deadline because I allowed myself to ask for help. Research shows that these daily reflections, this practice, can help us in regards to burnout, stress, and helping us in terms of increasing our optimism. Let's make this our newsroom ritual. And Let's also work to make it part of our legacy, and I should say our leadership legacy in an industry that we all love. Remember, your well-being is your most important job, and I'm always here to help. See you next week.